Welcome to WordPath, the show about Oklahoma Indian languages and the people who are teaching and preserving them. Tonight we're going to see excerpts from a recent event sponsored by the Intertribal Wordpath Society of Norman. It was held July 21st at the Jacobson House Art Center in Norman. I need to apologize for some of the camera work. It was just me that day and I was real under the weather. I still think it's worth watching though for its content. So I'm sorry if sometimes the camera's not on the right person for a minute or so. The idea of the event was to honor and promote books, new books in and about Oklahoma Indian languages, and offer the public a chance to hear from their creators and to buy some books and to get them autographed. And then the WordPath Society had free bookmarks to give out too. After the reception, there was a one-hour Caddo language class using the immersion method of language instruction. The featured books were, first of all, two children's books recently published by the Choctaw Nation. The first was called The Pashofa Pole, and the second was called The Boy Who Almost Lost His Name. And then secondly, a Choctaw-language book, sort of teaching grammar textbook, called Choctaw-Language and Culture by Marcia Haag and Henry Willis. And then thirdly, a little book called Choctaw-language Hasinay, which is a Caddo phrasebook, recently published by a nonprofit dedicated to Caddo language. So let's take a look at the event. First, we'll hear from Hannah Bryan from the Cherokee Nation language programs about the children's books.
Buy the book that has the same number. Yes, the Pashofa Pole and The Boy Who Almost Lost His Name.
These books are in series. I think there's five books to do. Right now I'm on my first one back. I'm on my first two pages of translation, so there'll be a third book coming out Saturday too, and probably others later on. It's like she said, this story about pushing the top off of this fiction, multi-fiction, and all these things that may or may not have happened in that time. But the person who wrote it, she had the intention of bringing out a children's book that would at least introduce pushing the top to the children. And it's written in a way that it's not for children to read. It's for the teachers to retranslate the language. So if you look at it, well, you'll see very words that are very hard to pronounce, even for Choctaw. And the Choctaw language is known to be not only Choctaw, but the Indian languages are known to be compound language. And each syllable in the words come from another word. They are compounded together to make words. And if you find some words, it can become a phrase. One word can make up a phrase. So by adding other letters, you continue to add on more distinctive words to become a sentence. So, and a lot of times you look in there and we have some words, stem words, root words that we translate into different meaning as some of the word verbs will become a noun. And this is very interesting because when I start doing this, I find out that these words come from a word stem into a noun stem and continue to use it as an adjective or some other parts of speech. And I was studying last night, and I run into a lot of these little articles we have in there which we consider those words to be more distinct, makes the word more distinctive than just particles or articles of a sentence. So, Marcia and I worked on the books, and she is the one that does most of the English terminology, and we get together and we start break it down and give our translation of the books. And I noticed that sometimes the words I use may not be the same word as another area, and but we all speak the same. If you I always looked at it this way, we have synonyms that could mean the same things like this as English, and they might use one synonym and got stuck on it for some reason. Then we come up and never realize that she used probably all the synonyms. And same way with other tribal languages. They do the same thing. They have the word here and there, but when you put it together and put those articles, parts of speech, inflection of letters in, it becomes another word, and continues to change. And even one word, two words, or when it becomes a clause, a phrase, and it's all different, and it's used, it becomes the meaning becomes different. But I enjoyed translating these two books, and it's teaching me a lot of my vocabulary. Both languages are improving more than one thing. So it's a challenge, and I don't think it's a few years back I wouldn't have tried this, but now it's becoming more easier. And I hope you enjoy the book. If you
At the past Labor Day, I was showing my work at our Labor Day, and Joy Colbreth, she's one of the editor-in-chief of this book, and she came up to me and she said, Norma, we're planning to do, the Choctaw Nation's planning to build a gift shop, and we're planning to do a book. And I said, oh really? And she said, yeah. And then I said, she said, well, you think you'd be interested in doing it? And I said, well, is it a Choctaw story? And she said, yeah, it will be all, we're going to do 5 books. And then she said, it's going to be, the 5 series is going to be about this one family, the grandma and the little boy, Push, Mataha, but they call him Push for short, and Serena. And she was giving me the character on it. And I don't know if any of y'all is familiar with my work, but I do a lot of women paintings and children's. And I said, God, this is just perfect for me. So she asked me, and I said, yeah, I like to look at the stories and stuff. And then I started about in end of August, and I started doing the book. And I started, they give me the story, and I'd read it, and I thought it would be good because when I was young, going to school, being a little Choctaw girl, there weren't very many books around for us. I could look at books and read, and it'd all be about Dick and Jane or Sally, you know those books. And they didn't look anything like me. I didn't look like Sally. Growing up as a child, I always wanted a book to see something that looked like me, because I know I wasn't savage. I know I didn't kill people or chop them in the head, tomahawk. That wasn't the way we were, and I got confused. But with this book, I'm hoping some kids would look at it and see endings in a good way, the everyday life of us. Not, like I said, the other way. So I thought, well, if I could just do something for some kid and look at it and see their self in a different way, I feel like I've done my job. And I have kids coming up to me and telling me, that they like the book. They can't read the Choctaw side. Some of them can, some of them can't. I said, well, you got this other side. And then, it's good for them to, to see us the way we look like, and to me, that it's very, I feel very honored to do this book because I'm putting our people out there, and I mean, like he said, the story, it's not fact, but the life that was, the story that is in here, and the first one, with the chauffeur pole, when they were picking walleye and stuff, it's something that we do all the time, every year, what I live, my life, is what I put it down on my paintings. And to me, I think, like when I look at books and stuff, well, like I said, I quit school in 9th grade, so I can't read all that good. But when I see pictures, it brings life to a book. I'm not saying that his version is not important. It is. Our language is important. English language is important. Reading is important. But when you have something to look at, it gives you a character. It gives you something that you could say, hey, and then, you could say, oh, that little girl. Like when you read something with just no pictures, you're thinking, I wonder what that girl looks like, or that little boy. But when you see something, you could put it together. And to me, I think that's, like I said, I'm no writer or nothing, but this is my part, This is my part of the job, is painting, and that's what I try to do the best.
And Henry said something I wanted to follow up on. He said, these are not books for children to read. They are books to be read aloud to. One thing that I'm very proud of is the level of language in those two books. There are a lot of people who write little children's coloring books, about the grasshopper is dancing and the boy is calling his mother. This is a real story. It's very literary. The language is very high level. It's very hard to find American Indian languages that are written as literature with complex structure, big vocabulary words, lots of sentence structure. I'm so proud of the level of the language that is used in the Choctaw. And no, you have to be awfully good speaker before you can read that, but wouldn't that inspire you? Wouldn't you want to get to where you could read that story and understand it yourself? And there's some of the first literature, so what I would call literature that is in Choctaw that is not just, not to put down the idea of the hymns, which sing the hymns in the Bible, but we're talking about literature, stories out of people's heads, things that are originally written, as well as some of the old folk stories. The first ones are in this book, and they are literature. When you read them, this isn't the dog saw a cat. This is high-level stuff with beautiful vocabulary words. Anyway, that's my thing for literature, but it sort of goes into this. This is a textbook. It was written, fashioned on the old-fashioned foreign language textbooks that some of you remember from high school and college. This is a linguistically based book. It tries to introduce the grammar. How do Choctaw people think when they speak the language? What are the ideas? It isn't just, oh, this is how you say it in Choctaw, good luck to you. It's, what do Choctaw people know? What do they know when they're building the language up? And so that's my job, is to take what he has in his head and translate it into something that I can generalize and explain to you who don't know anything about this in a way that you too can begin thinking as if you were Choctaw. And even if you don't become a fluent speaker, Chokwa, then you can still go back and refer. You can say, now what is that marker that goes on? What are those negative person markers? And you can flip through and say, here's the graph that shows them. And this is the explanation about why we do it that way. So you might say, oh, it's real academic and textbooky. Yes, it is, and that's what we wanted. We wanted a place where you could go back and say, oh yes, verbs with recipient subjects. Well, that sounds boring, but you know what? Sometimes you need to know this when somebody's got to deal with the verbs with recipient subjects.
When you get to the language part of it, 50% of our language translations is the English language, and the other 50 is ours. So there's no, there's not Choctaw, but not English, but both. That's how you translate. If it's one language, then it's not translated. It's got to be English too. So in your language, those of you other tribes, if you work on your language, then consider it that your language is only 50% of the language that you're trying to translate into English. The other thing is you better know your English language, and that's where she helps me quite a bit, to the English language. And they can always say, I've heard people say, oh, well, I can translate this word. They have only one word to translate into, and that's not all. And even in Choctaw, we have some words that mean, oh, that doesn't mean. And in the language, we're all about the same. They call it compound language. So we all have different parts of speech in our wording. And that's what makes it so hard in Choctaw. Probably in your language too. If you had to translate your own language, you could say some words, and if you could in English, my God, you would have me. When I started, now I work with Marcia here for the long, Dr. Marcia. And she's a linguist, and in fact, she wrote her pieces in
About Choctaw.
Choctaw language. So she's pretty good at it.
So I'm really honored to have these, both of you Choctaw language scholars here. You know, people have used the word literature, and you talked about things that are textbooky, and I think it's just a lovely development that we're beginning to have these kind of choices in Indian languages now. If you think about an English language, a library that has mostly English language books in it, you can go up there and you can find biographies and history and funny books and serious books and books about physics and dictionaries and grammars and all kinds of fiction and nonfiction. You have a great variety. Each of these has its own kind of style and its own beauty and usefulness. And until recently in Indian languages, we haven't had that much to choose from. Margaret Malden, I was hoping she'd be here today, but she used to be our board chair at Intertribal Wordpath Society. And she said to me before, you go in the library and you can look up on the shelf and you can pick out all these things in the English language, or you might go to another section and you'll find a variety of different kinds of things in the Spanish language. She said, I want to live to see the day when I can go to the Creek language section and find the biographies and the history and the grammar books and the dictionaries in the Creek language and my language. She said, we need to develop a literature of our own.
This is the first that we know of teaching tool published in the Caddo language. We published it ourselves. It's a phrasebook of handy phrases in the Caddo language just when you're just starting to learn how to, greet people and the names for objects and how to ask for things. And it goes along with the other thing we just started, which we're going to have a demonstration of at 1 o'clock, which is immersion language teaching. And the Caddo language only has, that we can tell, about 25 speakers, one of whom is sitting right next to me right now. This is Randall Edmonds. I just wanted to. I'm talking about our the language class that you teach on Saturdays that we teach together. And I was just saying that it's a new thing that we just started. That we're just getting a following. It's a sort of a slow start. It's Saturdays at 1 o'clock at the Red Earth Museum, and we're going to do a demonstration today at 1 o'clock right here. I don't really know too much more to say about the phrasebook except just take a look at it. We published it here in Norman at Ava Copy. It sells for $5, and it's been pretty popular. We've already in our second printing.
We thought of these like European or Asian phrase books. If you're going to travel to Japan, you can get a Japanese phrase book that tells you how to buy stamps and get a train ticket and ask directions and all these things and ask where the restroom is and things like that. And so we started thinking in terms of those categories. We were thinking, we don't want this to be some weird Indian thing. We want this to be just like any phrase book for any language in the world. But one very interesting thing, depressing in a way, but kind of, it suddenly dawned on us that a lot of those sections in phrase books for other languages we couldn't have, because you're never probably in our lifetime anyway, you're not going to have a use for buying your stamps in Caddo, or buying a train ticket or a plane ticket in Caddo. So then we started thinking, okay, if we don't have sections like that, we still, you might want to read through the table of contents, Brian, some of the topics we have. We have basically, we've kind of grouped them semantically, foods and animals and so forth, but we tried to also think of things that would be uniquely Indian opportunities for using language, and like going to a dance and the different kind of conversation that would come up around that would not be in a European or an Asian phrase book. So we found that whereas there were some things we just couldn't do or didn't quite make sense to do it for Caddo because of its sort of status as a language in the community, in the wider community today, there were other things we could do for Caddo that you would not do for German or Italian or Japanese.
Yeah, it starts off with stuff that would be in common in a Japanese phrasebook or a Swahili phrasebook or whatever. Greetings, introductions, and openings, getting general information, interacting in daily life, numbers, eating and drinking. Then we get Caddo dance and song. Then animals, common objects and clothing, health and the body, peoples, tribes, and nationalities. So Caddo words for all the other tribes and other ethnic groups too. Geography and place names, travel, weather and seasons, family relations, qualities of peoples and things. That's a lot of adjectives. And money, time and calendar, closings, and then language learning vocabulary, which is similar to what Alice put on the bookmarks. So we started the Caddo immersion class. We were all there one day. The first day of the Caddo language class was kind of an experiment. We didn't really know how it was going to work, remember? We just jumped right in and just spoke just Caddo and no English. And one of our students, would you mind saying a little bit about, if I won't put you on the spot if you don't want to, but too late. But too late. Just in a word or two, did you think it was fun, the way that?
Oh yeah, it was good, but I've kind of laid off of it for a little while, and she called me last night.
So you can refresh you can go back to lesson 1 today.
I know you're going to put me on the spot when we do this immersion. I'm right now, I'm looking up these words. And, I know this guy, he makes you speak. He don't let you just slide.
That's one of the keys. The teacher can't be too indulgent of the students and just say, well, if they don't want to talk, okay. If you go through an hour or 2-hour language class and you haven't been talking, then you haven't done your job as a student, and you're not going to learn as much as if you're forced to actually talk and use the language.
And we review every week. We always go back to the we don't want to move forward till we feel like every student who's there on that day is ready. I mean, that's, I think, the responsibility of the people running it, the teachers and the speakers. And ideally, we want to get to where only the native speakers would be running it, but just as kind of the transition period, we kind of team do it. I guess sort of like y'all's Choctaw class in that sense, right? In the sense that there's a non-speaker who's learning the language and there's a native speaker, and we kind of go back and forth. At any time, I don't know what, I have the benefit that I'm kind of, I talk really loud from my background in theater and stuff, and so I kind of like, I just feel like I'm just kind of trying to make sure that I'm always checking with the speakers. Always making sure I'm not saying things wrong, or trying to make sure I'm not saying things wrong, and that I'm just a student too. Really, it's just, we're all students except for the native speakers. And so I'm just trying to get the ball rolling, like, hey, everybody, let's turn English off for an hour. We ring a bell as a symbol. And the first couple of times, I got so carried away, we went for like over 2 hours. That was one of the days we learned the vocabulary for are you tired, are you hungry? And I was busy teaching that. I didn't catch the irony of the fact that everybody really was tired and hungry. Thanks for coming.
How are you? Will you read the scripture? Will you read a song?
Yeah.
You called me last night.
Familiar. I see you around here.
Yeah. Well, it's right down my back.
Wasn't that great? Now, we won't be showing the Caddo immersion class because there's insufficient time, and we showed a similar class on a previous show. But I would like to show you some of these things on the table here in more detail, some of the books and bookmarks, and give you a little bibliographic information. The WordPath Society was giving out these complimentary bookmarks. You won't be able to read them, but they have key vocabulary for immersion language learning, and you fill in the blank with the expression in your language. Then we had bookmarks from last year's celebration, artwork by Kathy Buttry. And we don't have the children's books here, but I'll show you to give you an idea of what the illustrations look like. So this is another artwork by Norma Howard, the artist of the children's books, in a similar style. To give you an idea, they're really just wonderful. It's wonderful art, and they make wonderful illustrations. Also, I wanted to show you the Choctaw textbook called Choctaw-language and Culture by Marcia Haag and Henry Willis, which you heard discussed at some length. This was published by OU Press, so that's available on campus here, for instance. And the last book was this little one called Choctaw-language Hasinay, which means Little Caddo Book, and it's the Caddo phrasebook. It's available for $5 from Kiwat Hasinay Foundation. I want to thank all of the authors, translators, artists, and also a special thanks to John Parrish, the executive director at the Jacobson House. Watch for the next Bookmarks event in November, just in time to make your holiday purchases. See you next time on WordPath.
Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita.